Hi everyone, this is Neil. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be doing a fun and easy food illustration. We're going to be painting berry flavored popsicles. Like usual, let's begin by drawing it out first. These are super simple. There are different ways you can draw these, but I'm just going to show you three types. The first one is the simplest and the one that I'm going to use because I want that big empty space to create the texture of the flavors. Then the second one is probably the most common. The shape is a little bit more squarish compared to the first one with two lines running in the middle. And the last one is more of a cylindrical form, and all of them are finished with the popsicle sticks at the bottom. You can really play around with the flavorings, and you can also imagine how the flavors will be mixed in with each other. So even though I'm going to create all three with berry flavors, I'm going to change up the texture slightly. I think firstly, a good thing to have in mind is what base you want to create your popsicle sticks with. Is it something that is a bit more translucent or a bit more creamy? I want mine to be creamy, something like a yogurt or a cream base. So for the first one, I want to use two types of berry jam running through the cream or the yogurt base. And the second one, I want to just create a strawberry flavored popsicle stick with a pinkish base and tiny strawberry specks. And for the last one, I want to create a blueberry flavored one with fresh berries. So I want to show the circles of the berries and the colors staining the popsicle base. And this can also be applied to any of the other shapes as well. Next, let's go over the colors because these are going to be berry flavors. The colors are all going to be fairly similar, but I'm just going to play around with the ratio of the color mixtures. So firstly, I'm going to go over the color of the popsicle itself, and the colors that I'm going to use are yellow, white, vermilion, which is more of an orangey red, then red, which is more similar to a pinkish quin red, purple, Prussian blue, and black. For the yellow and white, you can also substitute with Naples yellow, but it's slightly more pinkish. For this, I'm going to be using my Pentel colors, so the colors are very bright and vibrant. Next are the colors for the leaves and flowers, which I'm going to use as decorative elements, and I'm going to use a mixture of deep green and yellow ochre for the leaves, and then for the flowers I'm going to use yellow with a touch of vermilion. And lastly, for the sticks of the popsicles, I'm going to use a mixture of just yellow ochre and Van Dyke brown. But for the shadow, I'm also going to use a mixture of whatever color of the popsicles are, and I'm going to mix that with the brown. Let's start to paint. I'm going to paint the easiest one first, which is the strawberry flavored one. And for this, I'm going to place this in the middle. For this, I want to pick more of a coral pink, which is a bit more orangey. So I used Naples yellow with a bit of vermilion and a touch of red. And once I have the hue that I like, I decided to add a bit of white to lower the value. And I used a light to medium consistency to spread this color across as the base color. You'll probably realize that I only added the white to one side of the color mixture, and this is because I want to use the darker pink to layer on the texture of the strawberry. So after I finish spreading the base color, and while the base color is still slightly damp, I add on the darker pink in random spots so the base color looks a little bit uneven, and I just keep on working on it to create the spotty uneven texture. Next, I want to add darker specks for the strawberry flavor, so I added a bit of Prussian blue with red, and now the mixture looks more like a red-purple tone. And with this, I'm going to paint different tiny dots using the tip of my brush, making sure that all the dots look a little bit different. So play around with the angles and a little bit with the size, making sure that it's well spread out and randomized. You'll start to see that it's developing well, but I think at the moment the colors look a little bit too soft and flat. So to add a little more accent to the specks, I added a tiny bit of ivory black to the dark pink mix and used this to paint even smaller dots in some small areas. If you've added a bit too much in certain spots, you can also just use a damp brush to smudge those parts as well and blend it with the base texture of the popsicle. I think that the popsicle is pretty much done now, so I'm going to add the stick by using a mixture of yellow ochre and Van Dyke brown in a very thin consistency. And I'm just going to spread this all across that stick area, and I'm spreading it to the direction of the stick. So I'm just painting thin lines to create the wooden texture. And then for the shadow on the side, just to add a little bit of form, I added a bit of Van Dyke brown to darken the value slightly. And to finish everything off, I'm going to create a dark brown using the brown mix and the dark red mixture from before. And this is placed in between the stick and the popsicle to add depth and to separate those two areas. And then to further create the texture of the stick, I used my clean damp brush to smudge the dark brown and use it to create the lines for the subtle wood texture. For the next flavor, I'm going to paint the berry jam with, again, a cream base. So I'm going to use a mixture of the yellow and white as the base first and just spread this all around the popsicle in a very thin consistency, just like what I did with the light pink previously. As a tip, when you want to spread a thin consistency of color and you've accidentally created something that is a little bit too dark, you can also clean your brush and use clean water to spread the rest of the paint to get a thinner coat of the color. So now that the base is done and it's still a little bit damp, I'm going to first create a pink color for the raspberry jam on top. I used red with a tiny bit of purple and added to the base color mixture, and then I'm going to place this at the top part of the popsicle and also blending the color to the base. At this point, the color is going to be quite light, but it's okay because we're going to build this to more of a darker value. So there are layers of pinks as if the cream and the jam is starting to mix with each other. As I layer on the darker tones, I like to add a thicker consistency, and by also adding purple, you can create something that's a bit darker. I'm creating this so the darkest point is the tip for this one because that's the area with the most concentration of jam. And as I progress, I also like to pull lines towards the cream in different lengths to make it look as natural as possible. And this is to create a nice texture where those flavors are starting to blend. So just like the top, I'm going to add jam to the bottom of the popsicle as well. And this time I want it to be blueberry flavored, so I'm going to add Prussian blue to the mix so the color looks more like a dark purple now. And with this, I'm going to apply it the same way by blending and pulling the lines towards the base color and building up on the darker tones right at the bottom. This is because now the bottom is the most concentrated area with the blueberry jam. And with this flavor, because I can't get any darker with the Prussian blue, I also mixed in a bit of ivory black to create the darkest tone. So I'm just going to build on this now until I'm satisfied with the contrasting colors for both of the jams. As for the stick, I used the same method as before by using yellow ochre and Van Dyke brown, then add a shadow for the form on the side by using a darker brown by adding a bit more Van Dyke brown, and as the final touch and for added depth, I used the dark purple mix this time with the dark brown mixture to create the shadow in between the stick and the popsicle. For the last popsicle, I'm going to create a blueberry flavored one, but this time I want to have fresh berries incorporated. So just like before, I'm going to use the same mixture for the base, which is from yellow and white. And I'm going to spread this evenly as the first layer. And when I mean evenly, I also mean the wetness as well. So if I start to see areas which are drying before I reach the whole area, I tend to go back to wet the dry spots so I get a nice and even distribution. So for this flavor, because it's the same as the previous jam, I'm going to use the same color mixture. So I'm going to use red and Prussian blue, and then at the end I'm also going to add a bit of black as I build the darker tones. But as the first layer, I'm going to use a medium consistency of the purple, which is a mixture of red and Prussian blue, and paint the top part because aesthetically I think that having a higher concentration at the tip will make it look nicer. And as I get towards the bottom, I'm going to add dots in different sizes and also smudging some areas with a thinner consistency as well. Just like before, I'm going to add a thicker consistency of the same mixture, but this time I'm going to paint dots in different sizes all across those areas, especially where the purple is a little bit more concentrated, which is at the top. And I'm painting this while the previous layer is still a little bit damp or cold to the touch, so whatever I'm painting will slightly blur outwards as well without going too fast. And I also like to add little specks of purple for extra texture as well. For the dark layer, I'm going to use the same color with added black this time. So the color mixture is red, Prussian blue, and black. And I'm going to paint the same thing, which are dots all across the area. But this time I'm also not painting as much, so you can still see the base color and the different values as well. And just like the first strawberry popsicle, you can also soften and smudge certain areas by just adding water and using a clean damp brush, and then spreading the excess paint on something like the darker purple all across, so the darkest layer doesn't look completely out of place, but instead have some parts which are blending with the base color. And for the popsicle stick, I'm just going to repeat the same steps as I did from the previous popsicles, but this time I added the dark purple and the dark brown mixture to add the shadows. Here the popsicles are pretty much done, but I want to decorate the page further, so I'm going to add tiny little flowers and flower petals with leaves in yellow, because yellow complements purple well in my opinion. And I'm just going to activate the yellow on my palette and also have the green mixture ready, which is a mix of deep green and yellow ochre, but you can also use sap green. This is because I want to connect the stem to the flower while the flower is still wet, so it creates a nice blend. And for the yellow, I also prefer a deeper yellow color, so I added a tiny bit of vermilion, or you can also add a tiny bit of orange. And I find that a deeper yellow will look nicer on a white page, so it's a little bit more visible. For some of the flowers which are facing more towards the front, I'm also going to add a touch of vermilion to separate those areas and indicate the center of the flower as well. And you can also use different colors for this if you prefer other colors. These are just for decorations and it's completely optional, or you can also decorate with different small flowers or even use splatters as well, and it's really up to your aesthetic. After painting the small flowers, I also add little flower petals. For the flower petals, I just painted it as comma shapes. I find that having both the flowers and the petals, it somehow makes the composition look a little bit more delicate, which is why I like including them. Then I'm going to finish the decorative elements off with some leaves as well, so the colors look a bit more balanced and not too empty from the use of yellow because it's quite light in color. Here I thought that the composition looks okay, but it still looks a little bit too flat in my opinion. So lastly, I decided to add shadows by using only Prussian blue, and I'm using this in a thin consistency to paint the shadows for all of the popsicles as well as the decorative elements. But I also want to add a slightly darker shadow by layering a slightly thicker consistency for the popsicles, just to show that the bottom is not completely flat. And that's pretty much it. These are the finished popsicles with the flowers, and I'm really happy that I made the decision to add the shadows. But again, of course, you can decorate this any way you want to customize it to your taste. Before I leave, I also want to announce that I have a new Skillshare class out where I will be doing a step-by-step paint along to a berry flavored cupcake painting as an extension to my previous Skillshare class where I shared a method of drawing and painting cupcakes, which you can use to apply to this class as well. If you would like to change any of the elements or the flavors, you can also do that, and the class, like usual, is quite detailed, but I did try to break it down into short lessons so you can take breaks in between whenever you need to, and you can always work in your own pace. So that's it for today's video. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching till the end. I hope you've learned something new, and I'll see you at the next one, and hopefully on Skillshare as well. Bye!